They thought she was the help. They handed her the piano as a joke. But just seconds later, the entire hall fell into absolute silence. Claire Whitmore stepped into the grand foyer of the Charleston Music Conservatory, the venue of the annual Winter Arts Gala, the most prestigious event of the year for South Carolina's upper class. Crystal chandeliers sparkled from the high-arched ceilings, and the polished mahogany floors reflected the lights like a mirror. Gentle classical music played from the corner of the room, where a string quartet performed in an idyllic setting. Claire wore only a simple pale gray linen dress, unadorned and without a single trace of shimmer. Her hair was neatly tied up, her face bare of makeup, and the only piece of jewelry was a slender silver ring on her ring finger. She didn't stand out, and she wasn't trying to. The only person Claire knew in the hall was Ben Halpern, a former colleague from her time in the music publishing industry. It was Ben who had invited her to come along, and she'd accepted mostly out of courtesy. He now worked as an advisor to the event organizers, and thought Claire might find some inspiration in reconnecting with the world of music. But Claire wasn't inspired. She stood silently by the refreshment counter, holding a glass of soda with no ice, listening to a group nearby engaged in a heated debate about classical violin technique. They spoke loudly, each one trying to sound more knowledgeable than the next. Claire remained quiet. Her fingers gently brushed the strap of her canvas shoulder bag, a habit whenever she felt out of place. She had once been used to parties like this, back when she was a scholarship student at Berklee College of Music, performing for similarly refined audiences. But she had long since left the stage behind, choosing a quieter life away from the spotlight. A high-pitched laugh snapped Claire out of her thoughts. It was Veronica Astor, a well-known arts patron infamous for her sharp tongue. She wore a silver-studded evening gown and a diamond necklace that commanded attention. "Well now," Veronica said loudly, her voice thick with sarcasm. "Who are you, dear? How did you wander in here with that linen dress?" The group around Veronica burst into laughter. A young man in a red velvet jacket, seemingly a rising artist, chimed in, "She must be staff. Come to clear the glasses after the party." Claire kept a calm expression, gently placing her glass on the table. Not a flicker of hurt crossed her face, but her hand gripped her bag strap just a little tighter. Another woman, Genevieve Caldwell, the owner of a renowned modern gallery in Atlanta, stepped forward, her gaze scanning Claire from head to toe. "Let's be honest," Genevieve said. "You're a complete mismatch for this evening. This is an arts gala, not a thrift store." She flicked her hand toward Claire's dress, as if touching it might soil her. Those nearby nodded in agreement, and a few discreetly raised their phones to snap pictures of Claire like she was some novelty. Claire still said nothing. She merely adjusted her bag, as if reminding herself to stay composed. "Don't be shy, tell me your name." Veronica stepped closer, her overpowering perfume hitting the air. Her smile was razor-sharp. "Claire Whitmore," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "Sounds like a completely average name," Veronica laughed. "Do you even know where you're standing right now? This place is for people like us to shine, not for someone like you to sneak in through the back door." A young woman in a tight red dress pushed forward, her lips painted crimson, her curly hair teased into volume. "She probably crawled out of the subway," she said in a shrill voice. Still, Claire said nothing. Her gaze remained steady, calm, unwavering, and entirely unaffected. Growing up in a strict household, Claire had learned to wield silence as a weapon. Her father could silence a whole boardroom with a single look. Her mother, elegant and unyielding, always taught her, "You don't have to prove anything, you just have to do what's right." And that was how Claire had lived for many years, rejecting the spotlight, refusing to react, letting the world believe whatever it wanted. She found it easier to breathe when people thought she was ordinary, because that meant she didn't have to strain herself to meet anyone's expectations. But tonight, it seemed they were determined not to let her be. Claire was still standing there, her expression steady, when a young male voice called out from behind, "So, do you even know how to play, Claire?" The whole group turned. It was Tristan Blake, a rising violinist, with slicked back hair and a perfectly tailored black velvet suit. He held a gleaming violin in one hand, smirking as if he had just discovered a new toy to play with. "You're here for the music, right?" Tristan continued, his tone tinged with mockery. "Why don't you play something, just for fun?" Laughter broke out. A young woman pushed forward from the crowd, Brooke Delaney, a social media influencer with millions of followers. She wore a glittering gold jumpsuit and immediately raised her phone to start recording. "Oh my God, this has to go on my story," Brooke said loudly, her eyes fixed on Claire. "Look at her standing there like a startled deer. This cannot be serious." She turned the camera toward Claire, zooming in on her plain dress and makeup-free face. "Number gala gone wrong," she whispered gleefully, and the laughter spread like wildfire. Claire didn't move. Her hand brushed the strap of her bag again, her gaze unwavering. From the left, a group of glamorously dressed young women parted to make way for Madeline Prescott, daughter of a renowned conductor. Madeline wore a small, jeweled tiara, likely an inside joke, and walked up with the overconfidence of entitlement. "Is she actually going to play?" Madeline giggled, then looked around for approval. "God, this is like watching a dog try to walk on two legs." The group of girls burst into laughter on cue, like a well-rehearsed skit. Once again, Claire didn't respond. She simply adjusted her bag strap, her eyes landing briefly on the violin Tristan still held in front of her like a challenge. By now, the crowd had formed a circle around Claire, as if waiting for a comedy act to begin. Someone shouted, "Play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." Laughter erupted again, louder this time, drowning out the soft classical music still playing in the corner of the room. Ben Halpern had now made his way closer, his eyes filled with concern. He whispered, "Claire, you don't have to do anything. Just let them talk." But the pressure from the crowd felt tangible, like a wave closing in, pushing Claire to the center. A man from the back shouted, "Live stream's rolling. Get ready for the violin disaster of the year." Tristan lifted the violin, stepping in closer. "Come on, Claire, if you dare take it. Or do you not really know how to play?" She looked at him silently for a few seconds, then nodded. "All right," Claire said. Her voice was very soft, but so clear that everyone heard it. Tristan burst into laughter and handed the violin to her like he was passing a foreign object to an amateur. Margaret Astor, appearing from somewhere, beamed as she said, "This is why I love these parties. Always an unexpected comedy show." Claire gently took the violin. Her hand stroked the neck of the instrument as if touching something familiar. She adjusted the chin rest, the motion, precise and reverent. But no one noticed. They were too busy watching each other, laughing, recording stories. From across the room, a man with bleached blonde hair and an outrageous white tuxedo stepped forward. Chase Langford, a Broadway producer known for stirring up drama. He clasped his hands in front of his chest like stepping into a bad play. "Oh, my heart is breaking. Look at her standing there with that little violin like she's about to cry." He turned to the crowd, speaking louder. "Everyone, should we give her a round of applause for encouragement?" The hall erupted in applause, slow, mocking, dripping with sarcasm. Claire tightened her fingers around the bow. She wasn't looking at anyone, but her spine remained straight. Chase leaned in, voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "Get lost. You're ruining the mood." Someone nearby laughed so hard they spilled wine near Claire's feet. She still stood there silent, unmoving, without a word of protest. All eyes were on her, but Claire no longer saw them. In that moment, something stirred inside her. Not anger, not fear, but a quiet, profound, unshakable resolve. And as she raised the violin to her shoulder, the room still hadn't realized. The mockery had just signed its own sentence. Claire stood in the center of a circle of raised phones, camera flashes flickering like an interrogation. Her right hand held the bow, her left gently supported the violin, still warm from Tristan Blake's grip. She took a deep breath, her eyes closing for just a heartbeat. In that moment, all the noise seemed to retreat. The laughter vanished, the ridicule disappeared. It was just her and the violin. And in her memory, a familiar voice whispered, "Feel the music, Claire. Don't be afraid. Let it lead you." She opened her eyes and looked up at Tristan, who was still standing with his arms crossed, his lopsided grin radiating contempt. "What would you like me to play?" Claire asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly to every corner of the room. Tristan raised an eyebrow, glancing at his entourage as if he'd just won a bet. With a dramatic wave of his hand, he declared, "If you dare," he laughed, "play Paganini's Caprice number 24. That one's hard, actually, the hardest in the world." Laughter erupted like fireworks. Margaret Astor clapped exaggeratedly, her mouth open wide. "Oh my God, I absolutely have to see this with both eyes." Brooke Delaney had switched to vertical video, making sure not to miss a moment. "Number Claire challenge," she whispered like a reality television host, while her live stream filled with mocking comments. Ben stood silently nearby, his face tense. He was clearly worried, but didn't interrupt. Something in Claire's eyes told him she had made her decision. Claire said nothing more. She simply nodded once, sharp, decisive, as if accepting a perfectly ordinary request. Then she lifted the bow, adjusted her stance, and placed the violin beneath her chin. At that moment, the room was still laughing. But when the first note rang out sharp, clear as a blade, the laughter stopped, as if someone had sucked all the air out of the room. The second note followed, then the third. Then the opening of the Caprice unfolded, bouncing notes, double stops, lightning-fast runs. Every note Claire played was etched in steel, precise, expressive, undeniable. The crowd began to listen. Phones lowered, whispers faded. Margaret stopped laughing. Brooke Delaney stopped talking. Tristan Blake, who had issued the challenge, took a step back, his face contorting, his confidence slipping. In a corner of the room, an older man, Henry DeWitt, a veteran violinist with silver hair and a weathered face, sat upright, eyes wide. His hand gripped the armrest as if he had just realized something. Nearby, Dr. Ruth Langley, former violin professor at the Peabody Institute, fell silent mid-conversation. She tilted her head, staring at Claire as if seeing a ghost from the past. "That bow grip," Ruth whispered. "That's not a beginner's." Claire continued playing. She was moving through the early variations with stunning accuracy. All the demanding techniques, triple stops, left-hand pizzicato, cross-string double stops, emerged as effortlessly as breath. A tall man in a navy suit, standing near the stage, dropped his wine glass with a soft clink on the floor, but no one turned. Every eye remained locked on Claire. His name was Michael Reed, a talent scout for major orchestras. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide, as he whispered to his assistant, "That's Claire Whitmore. I saw her perform when she was 17. She was unstoppable." His assistant furrowed his brow in confusion, but Michael shook his head, voice trembling. Then she disappeared. No one ever knew why. The music continued to pour from Claire's hands. By now, she was no longer at the gala. She was in her own world, where every drop of sound carried emotion, hope, pain, longing, and years of suppressed silence. Her feet shifted slightly, the hem of her pale blue linen dress swaying gently with her movements. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Those who had laughed were now silent, caught in a moment they couldn't break. When she reached the most difficult harmonics, those glassy, floating notes, Claire played as if she were no longer human, but the embodiment of the music itself. No mistakes, no hesitation, only feeling. A woman wearing a pearl necklace, seated near Henry DeWitt, her name was Helen Sutherland, widened her eyes. She had once served on the Georgia State Arts Council and had reviewed countless scholarship applications. Her hands trembled as she clutched the gala program. I remember that technique," she whispered to her husband. "It's her, the girl who once refused the spotlight. My God, she's back." And still, Claire played. She had awakened the entire hall, without saying a word, without defending herself, just through her music, a truth no one could deny. When Claire finished the final double stops of Paganini's Caprice number, 24, a long, resonant note lingered in the air like a silver thread stretched across the room. Then, silence. A perfect silence. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. Some still held their phones up, but no one was recording anymore. Everyone was too stunned to do anything. Claire lowered her bow, her hand still holding the violin, her back straight and her expression calm. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply stood there as if the music was still resonating within her, even though the hall had fallen into stillness. The first to applaud was Henry DeWitt, the veteran violinist, his hands trembling but filled with reverence. That lone clap rang out like the push of a door, awakening the entire room. A round of applause followed, slow at first, then erupting like a downpour. The entire hall rose to their feet. Some whistled, some wept. Dr. Ruth Langley stood slowly, her hand placed over her heart, her face glowing with tears. She didn't just clap, she tilted her head in respectful reverence, as one would to a true master. In the front row, Clara Beecham, a renowned violinist who had only come to the event for its prestige, now wiped her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Margaret Astor, who had mocked Claire so mercilessly, stood frozen like a statue, her diamond-studded hands clenching her clutch. Her face no longer bore amusement, only bewilderment. Beside her, Brooke Delaney had long since lowered her phone, her eyes locked on Claire. She had even forgotten to tap post story. Her mouth hung open, but no words came out. Tristan Blake, the one who challenged Claire, was still standing there, pale, arms limp. The violin he had once wielded like a weapon now felt like a burden. As the applause continued to swell, the event coordinator, Richard Leland, in a black tuxedo with slick silver hair, hurried up to the small platform where Claire had just performed. His face still bore the look of disbelief. He took the microphone, his voice shaky. "Excuse me, may I ask, who are you? How did you do that?" Claire handed the violin back to Tristan, who now received it like a defeated man, and turned to Richard. Her voice was soft, but every word carried through the hall. "I'm Claire Whitmore," she said. "I was a scholarship student at Berklee College of Music, but due to family reasons, I left the stage when I was still very young." She paused. The air in the room froze. "Tonight," she continued, "I didn't come here to perform. I came to listen and to remind us all. Art is meant to uplift people, not to humiliate them." Another wave of silence rolled through the hall, but this time it was a silence of shame, of awakening. Claire didn't linger. She stepped down from the platform the same way she had stepped onto it, calm, composed. The crowd parted to make way, as if afraid to touch something sacred. Ben Halpern met her near the refreshment table, his face glowing with astonishment. "Claire, God, I don't even know what to say. Why didn't you ever tell me?" She shrugged, adjusting the strap of her canvas bag. "It doesn't matter," she smiled gently. "My music doesn't need anyone's validation." They walked together toward the grand foyer, where the twin mahogany doors were slightly ajar. At that moment, a man in a charcoal gray suit appeared at the entrance. He didn't need to speak loudly, didn't need to wave his arms just by entering. The air shifted subtly. His name was Samuel Whitmore, Claire's husband, a professor of music history at the University of Virginia. His face was calm, his gait unhurried, his eyes glowing with quiet certainty. "Ready?" he asked, his voice warm and deep, as if he'd waited for this very moment. Claire nodded, her eyes softening for the first time that evening. "Yes," she said, "let's go." He placed his hand gently on her back, light, but steady. They walked out together, through the silent crowd. No one dared stop them, no one had anything left to say. From behind, a woman in a server's uniform whispered to a colleague, "Oh my God, that's Claire Whitmore, Professor Whitmore's wife." The words spread like wind. Shocked glances, murmured questions. "She's Claire Whitmore? The one who turned down every major contract? Why was she even here?" But Claire didn't look back. She had said everything that needed to be said, not in words, but in music. The next day, a video of Claire's performance at the Charleston Art Gala went viral across social media. Tagged with number Claire plays and number the woman in the linen dress, the clip, barely 3 minutes long, became a phenomenon. Not just for the extraordinary technique, but for the stark contrast between the initial scornful gazes and the final reverent silence. Those who once mocked her began facing consequences. Margaret Astor, once the face of the Charleston Arts Foundation, came under heavy criticism after the video clearly captured every disparaging word she had hurled at Claire. Less than a week later, the board requested her resignation for the sake of the organization's image and integrity. Brooke Delaney, the influencer who had mocked Claire on livestream, immediately lost a major sponsorship deal with a jewelry brand after netizens flooded the brand's page with the now viral exposé clip. Many created memes juxtaposing Brooke's smug expressions with the image of Claire bowing her violin, a biting satire that spread quickly. Tristan Blake, the man who challenged Claire to play Caprice No. 24, saw his professional image all but collapse. The clip of him handing the violin to Claire with a smug tone circulated widely. Classical music blogs reposted it under titles like "The Man Who Dared a Genius." His spring concert contract was canceled. His manager released a statement withdrawing representation due to an unprofessional attitude we cannot stand behind. Madeline Prescott, the haughty daughter of a famed conductor, was removed from the summer festival lineup by its organizers. Her father, once the artistic director of a major Boston orchestra, was forced to issue a public apology, pledging to re-educate his daughter on humility and respect. And, As for Chase Langford, the Broadway stage producer, a major arts blog reposted the clip of him mocking Claire moments before she began to play. Within 3 days, 2 investors pulled funding from his upcoming musical. Those who had once admired his sharp wit now saw only arrogance and cruelty. The entire city of Charleston seemed a bit quieter after that gala. People spoke less about sponsorships or sparkling gowns and more about kindness, and how not to judge others by appearances alone. And Claire Whitmore? She returned to her small third-floor apartment in a quiet neighborhood north of Charlottesville. That morning, she sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea, reading as she usually did. Samuel sat beside her, his newspaper spread across the table, glasses slipping down his nose. "You're still being mentioned in over a dozen papers," he said, a mix of surprise and admiration in his voice. "Let's see, the New York Times, The Atlantic, even Southern Strings Monthly wrote glowing articles." Claire smiled softly, lifting her tea. Let them talk. To her, it was over. Not because of the applause, but because of the moment she lifted her bow free, fearless, and with nothing to prove. She had reclaimed what she once thought was lost. A week later, an envelope arrived at her address-thick paper, embossed with the name of the Charleston Symphony Orchestra, signed by Clara Beecham, soloist and acting artistic director. The letter read, "We would be deeply honored if you would agree to perform with the orchestra at our upcoming season's opening concert. An evening of music of your choosing, any piece, in any form." People speak of that night as if it were magic, but we know it wasn't magic. It was true art, delivered by someone who knows how to love it the right way. Claire read the letter twice. Then she folded it and carefully placed it in a drawer next to a photo of her at 17, standing in a small practice room, eyes blazing with passion. She didn't reply right away. There was no rush, nothing left to prove. That evening, while out for a walk, a young woman in a server's uniform stepped out from a nearby diner. Her name tag read, "Isabel, Miss Claire," she called softly, holding a takeout bag. "I saw the video. My brother's been learning violin since he was little. But people kept telling him he wasn't good enough. After watching you, I told him, don't give up." Claire looked at the girl, her eyes bright and sincere, then gently touched Isabel's hand. "Tell your brother, if the music is still in his heart, someday it will speak on its own," Claire said. "Just keep playing, just keep believing." "I knowed." The girl nodded, her eyes shimmering, then turned away, walking quickly as if afraid she might cry. And Claire, she continued her walk, just as always. Head held high, quiet, but this time, no longer invisible in the crowd, because the world had heard her music, and no one could ignore it anymore. So the quiet yet extraordinary journey of Claire Whitmore came to a close, a wordless melody that moved an entire room once filled with doubt. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe, so we can continue bringing you heartfelt, human stories that renew our belief in the worth of every person. See you again in the next journey.